Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of Miller Mindset. I have with me today Andy Grolnick, the CEO of Graylog and longtime friend. Known Andy since he was at the days of Logarithm, and he's been a real legend in the space of SIEM and cybersecurity. So I want to have a few minutes to spend with him today and go over some topics that we've prepared. But I want to welcome you all to the show. This show is brought to you by BitLyft. This is where we discuss all things cybersecurity, cutting through the noise, sharing brutal truths, and leaving you with strategies that keep what you've built safe and strong. So without further ado, welcome Andy to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Good to be here. I've been in tech really my whole career. I'd say the first half didn't really get into cybersecurity until about 2005, so about 20 years ago. Prior to that, I spent time in everything from 3D design, technical workstations at Hewlett-Packard to software, enterprise software, operating systems, and several years in storage and backup and removable storage. Spent some time, if you remember the zip drive, I was the original product manager for that and launched that business and jumped from there to cybersecurity. So it's well, not directly from there, but about 20 years ago, in kind of, I'd say, the relatively early days of the industry. Yeah.
I mean, you think back 20 years ago, we were all thinking, like, was SIEM going to stick around? We were having these conversations around, were logs really important? You had people in the space arguing and debating back and forth of whether we actually need these logs.
Yeah.
Today, if you're not doing log management, SIEM, and holding logs for NIST says 365 days is a minimum recommendation, I mean, you're kind of laughed at in the space,
Yeah, it's become, it's gone from where people were just starting to do that then to where it's common. It's something you really have to do and need to do for a variety of reasons. It can be threat detection, threat hunting, compliance, obviously all kinds of things. But it is funny. There were several in the last 20 years, several times during spots in that time frame where SIEM is dead and then people are coming out with basically new versions of SIEM or new flavors of it, and so it's evolved. It's been very dynamic over the years, and it's part of what makes it interesting. It's always challenging in a good way.
Yeah, I've had a fun time with you. We started BitLyft, as you know, using Logarithm as a managed service and deploying that to customers, and had great success. And now today, as you know, we're using Graylog as part of our foundation of our offering at BitLyft. But it's been a common, consistent throughout the years. Go back to 2015, 2016, even back to your days in 2005, you have needed logs, at the basis of the foundation in order to perform things. Now that perform things has changed, and it's morphed over time, and it's gotten better and it's gotten different. That's where you use the word dynamic, and I like that. But the foundation hasn't changed. We still need logs, and we still need to see activity to do detections and perform reasoning and use in different engines and things like that. But, I want to ask you this, is as far as as you've seen the cyber marketplace evolve, how have buyers changed, and what do you think is sort of kind of upcoming next?
Yeah, actually, before doing that, just want to touch on a point you made prior to that, and kind of where SIEM fits in and how it's evolved. I think it's I think what's really interesting is one way to think about it. How I always thought about it is SIEM is really the hub of the SOC. You think about central intelligence. So logs obviously are the foundation, and there's all kinds of insights. I think of them as the digital fingerprint of IT, right?
Yeah.
It tells you everything that happened, and so that's table stakes, right? Getting that in and being able to analyze, and then add to that all different kinds of security data and alerts, and you have your central intelligence for a security operations team, and the foundation that you can build around, where you can see we really see what's going on, right? And in the early days, I think that someone said something to me very, very simplistically, like, I want this because I want to know what's going on, and if I don't have it, I don't have the visibility. It's evolved and been, improved and been, as we said, dynamic over the years. But it's still that, like analogous to an ERP to run your business. SIM is that ERP for security, if you will.
100%. Yeah, I mean, ERP, right, has changed over time. It's morphed with the business. It has evolved with the business, but the foundations are still there.
The fundamentals.
The fundamentals are still there.
They haven't changed. They've just improved and gotten better. And they're obviously movement to the cloud and all these different dynamics. But I think that's an important concept to understand. And then you were back to your other question, which was what I think we were asking how have buyers changed over the years? Is that what you're getting at? Or?
Yeah, I mean, so if we look at the cyber marketplace now that we've talked about, SIM and logs being that foundational component, the cyber marketplace today is really interesting. We're sitting here in, May of 2025, and we're thinking about, you just touched on something that, I want to emphasize. We have more people using the cloud today, and the cloud looks a lot different than it even did 5 years ago. We're no longer just putting virtual workloads up in the cloud and things like that. And so I feel like the cyber marketplace, is sort of different today than it was even 5 years ago. And I think everybody would be like, well, yeah, no duh.
Sure. Right.
But I feel like also the buyers have evolved, and I feel like, so this is a question for you, because I know that you keep your pulse on kind of like what's going on in the marketplace, but what do you also see that's upcoming, and maybe we'll get to that throughout our talk today.
I think it's hard to generalize and could put all buyers in one bucket.
Yeah.
And the reality is you have, multiple segments of the market, folks in different industries, that or different size companies that have different levels of maturity in their where they are in their security journey, right? And if you go back 20 years ago, everything was basically physically on premise, right? And so there was a physical barrier to what you were protecting, and that was the mindset. And then, as more and more move to the cloud over, now I've got this hybrid environment I have to protect, and that's still the case today. And so the complexity of what customers have to protect, and CISOs and their teams has gone up, and you've got. Then you have, I say, getting back to your question, the multiple levels of maturity, right? So there's a lot of customers out there that are still working on the fundamentals, two-factor, multi-factor authentication, patching, a lot of the key things that attackers and vulnerabilities, that they take advantage of, and so there's kind of a continuum of maturity, if you will, and so each each buyer, each customer has to kind of assess where they are and kind of what their improvement plan is going forward. And then you've got folks, who are very advanced, trying to take advantage of AI technologies and so on and so forth.
You touched on a couple things there, right? I mean, like, we had the early pain points of buyers, what you would call, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when it was a lot more on-prem. And they were just, hey, I need to protect my internal assets. And then you had over the years that cloud adoption and starting to move into cloud and SaaS. And I also think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think managed services also help sort of shape the space. I think a lot more customers were needing help with cybersecurity. We're needing help understanding, like, why is log management in SIEM so important in the space? And it was managed services, whether you were a MSP, MSSP, or you were just similar to us, you were just an MDR company, doing managed services around SIEM and log management only. You were trying to help people detect threats, respond to those threats, and then shore up their IT practices internally and their controls, right? But, I feel like if you look back then and you kind of fast forward now, were there any surprises over the years as the market evolved, or, anything that sort of like, came out of nowhere for you?
I wouldn't say came out of nowhere. I think one of the surprises and this was kind of a slow rolling thing, but it took a lot of customers. It took customers longer to get comfortable with sending, sensitive log data into the cloud, right? I thought that would evolve quicker than it did, and then once it did, it wasn't a switch, but it was fairly quickly over a couple of years, people started getting more comfortable with that. So that's certainly one thing. And if I guess another related surprise is, I'd say that a lot of the security industry, the early days, were driven more by compliance regulations that in a sense were your doctor tells you need to do all these things to be healthy, right?
Right.
Compliance regulations are in many ways security best practices, right? That tell you what are the right things to do. And so in a good way, it drove people to try to develop those best practices. But it wasn't until and this is a bit of a surprise, I guess, in a sense, it wasn't until you had some of these major breaches like Target and
Home Depot,
right, around that time. So that really woke everyone up on the risks. Just a credential being stolen from a vendor, and put and that was and that I think was the beginning of the shift from the market being very compliance driven to a better balance of, hey, I need to do these things to really protect my company, my brand, our sensitive data, our intellectual property. There's real threats going on, and I think and then over to your point about managed services, I think those came into play as the need went down market, right? A lot of the early adopters were very large banks and financial services and government, where there was they were being attacked more and there was more risk. But then everyone realized everyone's at risk.
Everyone's susceptible.
And it started going down market. Now you have in the mid market and the small businesses, or small to medium business, a lot of them don't have the budget or the resources to do this on their own. They may have one person in security, or may not even be dedicated. Maybe it's
Somebody
part of
wearing multiple hats.
multiple hats,
Yeah.
and so that then, I think managed services grew out of that need, where it actually, for a lot of companies, makes more sense. Hey, let me hire a managed service to run most of my security program versus trying to do it in house. And companies have gone back and forth, but I think that's going on now. I mean, they're still in a lot of companies that are just adopting, security programs for the first time, and they're weighing whether to do it themselves or do a managed service.
I completely agree with that. I like the way that you approached it, and it did come down market. And I also think that a lot like you'd procure a SaaS today, there's what I call app dedication, right? You'll find an app that's dedicated towards health or weight loss or hiking, right?
Right.
There's a cool app that we use. You're probably familiar with it, called All Trails.
All trails, love
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
and it's an app solely dedicated to showing you all the hiking trails, for every state, right? And I
well,
almost
and when you get lost on the hike and you're trying to find your way back,
yeah
hopefully you have service there, right?
yeah
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise, you break out of your backpack the Starlink, right?
yeah,
You set that up, and hopefully you got a battery pack and
yeah,
all the other
yeah,
things. But I'm glad that you said that, because you know a lot like a managed service. I feel like the MDR and even what BitLift's business model does, but the managed services market is almost that subject matter expert, that dedicated app, right? That you'd hire them to come in and do that thing that they are subject matter experts at, that you can't do internally at your organization, you know? And and in the cybersecurity space, when you talk about SIEM and log management and threat intelligence, detection methods, um, you know, it's not like you can just take one of the people that are on your current staff and say, "Hey, you're going to go do this now," because I would argue that it probably takes about a year for that person to even become proficient. Um, it'd be like saying, "Hey, you're going to go out and do plumbing today," and then the person's never touched, PVC pipes and all the other stuff that go with it, and to know the code and all of that, right?
yeah, yeah.
It
And then you've got water all over your house because you didn't know to do this or that, right?
yeah,
And yeah, yeah,
yeah. And so coming back, I too, the market really has evolved, I would say. I've even looked at and kept my eye on SIMs that were sort of hot in the space, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Almost seem like there's this morphing to where they're having to almost rethink how they're approaching SIM in log management today, because the integrations have changed. Right now, all of a sudden, you're integrating to a lot more cloud and SaaS products, and you're in ingesting logs differently. And then there's the nuance of, I say nuance, but AI, right? Everybody's talking about AI. Any thoughts there that you sort of want to touch on about how this market has changed over the years, specifically to SIM?
yeah. It's interesting. When I started, there were right around that time there were actually two categories. One was SEM and one was SIM, and Gartner merged it into SIEM. Um, and SIM was more about collecting all the data, all the logs, being able to search, and 100% of them, save them, search into them, keep them for audit reasons, and be able to, triage and find what you want to find,
Right.
for either IT ops use cases or security. And then SEM was more the analytics layer, things like ArcSight and net forensics and all that, where they would take a portion of the data and perform analytics. And it really made sense for those two to be one, right?
Yeah.
So that foundation layer, and I think what's evolved is the long-term winners were and are ones that first of all do that foundation well, where you know the what used to be called the SIEM part,
Right.
And collect and be able to do all kinds of things with the data, and then graduate part or all of that to an analytics layer. And what's evolved over the years, a lot of focus was on the analytics layer, adding things like using actually, SIM was an early user of AI in terms of machine learning.
Yes.
This goes back 10 years ago,
Yes.
for user and entity behavioral analytics, right?
Yeah.
Because you think about the traditional threat detection was all around known threats, signatures that and that worked well for a while, but the attackers get a lot more sophisticated, and there's no way to keep up with all their techniques, and you're always late, right?
Right.
So the one way, so how do you figure out and detect unknown threats? And so SIMs and start adding technologies around anomaly detection and behavioral analytics, where you're looking at learning what normal is for a user or a host, and looking for spikes or anomalies around that normal data.
Right.
And so there was an early use of AI that SIM was actually a bit of a trailblazer in.
Yeah.
And it made sense to be part of that. And so, going forward, are there other ways, to use AI in terms of improving the analytics? Or a lot of work right now, I think, in the area is around how do I make the SOC analyst job more efficient? How do I automate a lot of the mundane, boring
The thing that's
tasks?
burning people out. Right?
Yeah, the stuff that's burning, and we've had a shortage of security analysts for years, right? For people. So the timing of this, it's a partial maybe solution to that. I believe the human element will always be there, but there are ways AI and at Graylog we've used it to help automate triage and investigations that analysts are doing, summarizing reports and around the work they're doing. So take some of the work that's not the best use of their time, but automate that, and several other areas we're looking at. So that's where I think a lot of, I think you'll see folks trying to use AI as kind of the next step of threat detection analytics, but also making the SOC. How do I automate more of what's going on in the SOC? And so and there've been I've probably left out 3 or 4 things that were added in SIEM: case management, poor man's SOAR to full SOAR, and so on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now, you bring up SOAR, and now here we watch Gartner again say like, oh, SOAR is dead, but AIR, automated incident response, which is actually like what we named our product, years ago, and have a trademark on it. But automated incident response is on the path to enlightenment. Whatever that means, you're enlightened, I'm enlightened. But it's just funny to see how the trends in the tech do change. I think that's something that I had a major appreciation for, and I wonder if you did as well. But the cybersecurity space, when I started in the space, was probably around full time was probably around 2008, 2009. Before that, I would consider myself network engineer, system administrator, director of IT. But I really dove in full time into security around that time frame. I had been working at Sunbelt Software, and they made Viper email security, Viper antivirus, and that type of thing. And the funny thing is you seen a lot of security people driving products based on their research and based on proof. A lot of factual evidence, a lot of research papers. They showcased a lot of things. I wonder if we actually see as much today in that as we did back then. As far as the research aspect goes. You have any thoughts there?
I think it's natural for any industry as it evolves, and gets more sophisticated. Maybe the research or the academic research around it evolves as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's my sense of what's going on. I still think there is a lot of interesting research going on out there around it, but it's shifted to more advanced, things like we just talked about. How do you leverage AI as a tool to make security better, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. So
Yeah.
it's more of the topics have changed. I every few months I get an email or a LinkedIn from someone at a university who's doing some kind of project and wants to, see if Graylog can partner with them on it and so on. We've got Graylog being open source. There's a lot of users of Graylog in research areas.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I have appreciated about Graylog a lot is that the open source side of things, help out the research. It helps out sort of in bridging the gap of the get started and the beginner. And then obviously once, a corporation or organization or a not-for-profit wants to use it in a sophisticated manner, then you've got the enterprise edition and you've got the paid for and support and tons of other great stuff in there. But one topic that I do want to touch on is so the modern cybersecurity buyer seems to be just kind of a little bit different today. In some ways, I feel like the buyers they care, but I think that their care is almost a little bit different. And I'll say it like this: we get a lot of people say, "Well, I've got 10 or 15 cybersecurity tools deployed, and so we're pretty covered." But at the same token, then we hear from some others that well, even though I have 10 or 15, whatever the number is, tools deployed, I probably still have some gaps. And I appreciate the latter person, because the recognition of the gaps that they probably still have, right? The former person, I think, believes that they've got enough tools that if something happens, they can say, "Hey, well, listen, we deployed 10 or 15 tools. We're good, right?" Do you think the CISOs today or the decision makers are truly more educated, or are they just busier and overwhelmed?
I think the answer is yes to both of those.
Yes to both of them.
I think definitely security practitioners, CISOs are more educated, and they've had to be, as the security in general, has gotten more sophisticated and more mature. But I think they're at the same time, to your point, they're also overwhelmed. And part of the reason I can totally empathize with them, they're the nuance is at various levels of maturity here, but I'm generalizing here. If you think of what's happened in our industry for the last 10 years, there's just been an explosion of number of companies, driven. There's been a lot of venture because security is so important. There's a real need and a real threat. There's been a ton of investment, creating new companies. And so then, what's happened is there have been, just like the computer industry back, is you get all these new segments and subsegments and nuances between trying to understand what does this product do, what does this solution do. I go back to the early days of the computer industry. I started my career as the PC was just coming out, right? And there was one big computer show called Comdex.
Oh, yeah.
And at some point it just blew up and stopped, right? And what the reason for that was the industry had gotten so big with so many segments. There was now a security show called RSA, and there were storage technology shows and business application shows and so on and so forth. And so you just couldn't do it all in one place and cover it all, right? And
Vegas isn't big enough.
Yeah, so you just as things get bigger, they get more specialized, right? Yep. And it's almost like a company, right? And in the early days of your company, right, you probably wore a lot more hats than you do today, right?
Correct.
And so that's just kind of, I think, the nature of the evolution in security over the last, particularly 5 to 10 years. There's just been an explosion and specialization around solution and a lot of innovation. That there's really good stuff that has come out, but you fast forward to today, now you've got so many different companies saying they've got the solution or the magic bullet or whatever, and it's hard to keep up with that all. Like I really empathize for any CISO or security team out there. It's like, what are all these different segments and what used to be vulnerability, I think, is now called it evolves and it's it's exposure management, right?
Right.
And or whatever the
new acronym,
the acronym of today. So you got segments that have changed, new segments, sub-segments, and man, it's hard to keep track of it all. And, yeah.
I wonder if you guys are experiencing this sort of challenge. Then my and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I'm guessing that you probably are. We do as well. We get the question, how do we distinguish ourselves between say hype and value, right, in noisy space? If we come across somebody that we're like, you have a gap, and they're like, but I have this other tool, and then they're making an assumption that this other tool or this other thing is covering them, and I think this is sort of a struggle in the space. How are you guys sort of answering this challenge, distinguishing between hype and value in such a noisy space?
Yeah, I think from the customer, and many customers are kind of reacting in the way I'm about to articulate is they're doing. If you're doing it right, you're doing a lot of research on your own. A lot of times, they've done research, whether it's been on the web, it's been talking to their peers, and trying to, if they have an interest in something, they're going to be usually somewhat educated before they start talking to vendors, and And again, if they're doing it right, they're thinking about where they are on the maturity curve and their security journey and what their needs are at that point. And so I think that's part of what's going on. And I think, if you go to, it really hits you when you go to a show like RSA, even as a vendor, right? And you walk around and it seems like everyone's, the high level messages just blend together, blur together. They're very similar. This year was a lot of AI messaging and stuff, but there were 5-10 years ago, there was a term security analytics, we became the hot thing, and everyone was talking about that in one way or another. And so at that top level, you have to peel the onion as a consumer of that information, and really drill down two or three layers. And when someone says, well, we do this, we do threat detection better than anyone else. What do you really do? What does that mean? Tell me how you do it and what you do. And so that's how, but I think anyone in the industry you really have to dig, 2 or 3 layers to really delineate between what's really going on.
That's what I love when we're sharing with a prospect or a customer is I want to get right down to the truth. I want to get right down to how are we doing what we say we're doing, because I think it's so important. Everybody essentially has access to the same Microsoft APIs or Google APIs or AWS, but I think it's in how they execute, right? And a customer is typically, I love the analogy that they're signing up for outcomes, right? If you buy a car and you buy it with air conditioning, you don't want to necessarily you don't care about how they go about cooling the air. You're just wanting to make sure that the air is cooled, and you're buying the outcome. And in most of the cases, I think that companies today are wanting to buy the outcome of security. They want to know that their organization is being secured, it's being secured properly, and it's being secured in the most efficient way. And it also doesn't cost them an arm and a leg. They, for the most part, want to still remain profitable and a viable business, but they also know that they need security, just like they need locks on their doors and badge access and all the rest of it, right? So I sort of wonder, just as we're forward looking here, where we're going next. What type of, in the last maybe 6 months, and then if you kind of think forward, what kind of consolidation do you think is going to take place, or maybe even more fragmentation in the marketplace? I don't know.
Yeah, great question. I think we're definitely in a wave of, I would say, consolidation. Back to what we were just talking about. The origin of that is the customers being overwhelmed, and there's just more and more products and solutions, and so and we've had a few. At least in the 20 years I've been in this industry, there've been a few waves of this where it does go back and forth, where the focus can be best of breed, and really I want the best things, where but there are trade-offs there, right? If I can work with fewer vendors, have better integration between the solutions, and maybe be able to get more things from one vendor, and managed services is a version of that, right? But we're definitely in and it's gone back and forth. So where people then well, let me see if I can get more, and so there've been a few waves. I think this one right now is clearly driven by that inundation of just I saw the statistic, the number of like cybersecurity companies we have today versus 5, 6 years ago is astounding, and so there is, uh, uh, customers are reacting to that by going, hey, I can't work with 30 vendors, right? And you talked about 15 earlier. I've talked to some and heard some talk about they have 40, 50 security vendors, large companies, and it's just not really practical or sustainable. And then to your point earlier, you're gonna get some gaps, inevitably, because you're not gonna be able to fully integrate. And so what you might have best of breed in a lot of areas, but you'll sacrifice in how do I manage all these, and how do I ensure they're all working and I'm getting value from all of them, and they're integrated, and so on. And so the pendulum kind of swings back and forth, and it's going back to, hey, let me see if I can kind of cut down on the number of products and vendors I have better integration, and so on and so forth. And how long that's going to go, I don't know, but that's certainly the sentiment now, that you see out there.
Yeah, I mean, Wiz gets bought by Google, right, for what I think 32 billion. Red Canary was just announced yesterday that they were bought by Zscaler.
Yep.
And so you see these this M&A activity happening, where it's consolidation of what I would almost even call them point products, where you mentioned there's 50 different tools or 50 different point products. Those point products are beginning to be rolled up into larger customer platforms, or larger software platforms for customers, and yes, hopefully to make the integration easier, because back to where we started, the SOC, the people in the SOC, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the people that are on the front lines, they're the ones with the hardest job, because they've got to stitch all this information together if it's not easily integrated.
Right.
And so, all day long, they've got events and alarms going off, and they're trying to figure out, hey, is this real? Is this false? Do I have a real problem here that I need more help with? It sort of leads into what we're starting to even see, and I'm sure you're seeing this as well, is this like the AI SOC, right?
Right.
And these software companies coming out and stating that, hey, we're an AI SOC, and but still the fundamentals are there. Still there's
Right.
logs happening. There's still a SIEM that's taking place.
That's right.
You're not throwing out the detection methods, but you're trying to speed up or automate the remediation, the reasoning, the decision-making processes, and all of the things that are kind of behind the scene to help that SOC analyst become more efficient and do more with their day, right?
Yeah, I think it's part of that evolution of the types of analytics, right? And you had basically signature based known stuff, anomaly detection. Now you're in how AI has some amazing capabilities. Can those be applied to make threat detection even better? I mean, it gets and to some degree, there's a lot of hype around it right now, right? And
Yeah.
it's gonna be the panacea for everything. I think customers really have to understand, what it can and can't do, and vendors need to be responsible about articulating,
What it can and can't do.
truthfully what it can and can't do, and versus, and that's we're in that phase right now where there's a lot of hype, and what we're trying to do at Graylog is really, back to your point about outcomes, is how do we leverage it to enhance the outcomes. The SIM is, as we talked about, the great foundation for the SOC, the ERP. some of the challenges over the years there've been kind of three main challenges, or I would say opportunities for SIEMs to get better. One is, the accuracy and efficiency of threat detection. I call that pillar number one, or problem number one. You have this challenge of being overloaded with false positives. If you're too loose and if you're too tight, you're gonna miss things, and which you don't want to do. So
Right.
how do you find that right balance? The second one is the tools and the platforms have historically been, many of them are just way too complex and not easily usable for particularly small to medium enterprises who want to use them, but even for large enterprises. So that's, the user analyst experience, and then the cost of ownership is been the other challenge. The very, very expensive, and so on and so forth, in terms of, okay, if I want to add more and more data, how do I deal with that? So we've been at Graylog, we've been focused on those three, solving those three problems, and so trying to, for example, leverage threat intelligence to, in our recent release, to map alerts to a broader attack chain. Because if I can actually, so back to the precision of threat detection, right? You may get an alert, and then you've got to triage what's really going on, what's going on around that. But we feel it's our job to make your job easier, right? So if we know campaigns have these 5 steps, and we detect 2 or 3 of those steps, we can fire up a high confidence, high risk alert that you're likely in the middle of this kind of attack,
Right.
And you should go do something. So that's an example on the first pillar. On the second one, one of the things before I joined Graylog that did my research on users, and they love the user experience, the flexibility they have, and so on and so forth. But that's an ongoing journey of improvement. So we, even though it's been a strength of Graylog, there are ways, over the years that we've discovered we can keep getting better at that. So we keep investing in that user experience and workflow and those kind of things. And that's an ongoing thing. And then the last piece, I think what's really interesting, we touched on the logs as being the core, the fundamental.
Yeah.
And when you get into the age of AI, right, having the data enables you to leverage AI and do insights and get insights that you might not get. So having the ability, the challenge customers have had over the years is they actually want to bring more data in, because the more data is more visibility, right? And let the tools automatically sift through it, right? But if I have the more data I have, the higher probability I'll catch something, right?
Right.
But the cost of doing that has always been so high. So we introduced recently this notion of having a data lake. Think of it like a log lake, where I can bring everything in that I want, but and only graduate to the analytics layer the data I think I really need for that, but have everything else in case I want to bring it in. And so there's almost a better way to say it is, think about, there's a stratification of data. There's stuff I know I need in my hot tier for analytics and so on. But I want to have this other data standby just in case. And it's easy. It's already indexed. I can pull it in. I can find it and pull it in. But I'm not charged for all that until I bring it into the analytics tier, which is a fair compromise, and we're really the first SIEM to add that capability in there, which is exciting, and we're getting a lot of interest in that.
Yeah, and I applaud you guys for that because we see we see other SIEMs. I'll leave it at that. I won't name names, but we see other SIEMs in the space, almost all of them, right? And that mindset doesn't exist, right? The mindset exists of like, well, if you want to bring it in, we're going to charge you for it,
Right.
And I love the way that you guys have approached it and said, hey, well, we're going to let you bring it in. It's going to be at your fingertips and it's going to be ready, but it's not until you decide that you actually need it as part of your
outcomes,
that we're going to charge you for it. And so this way here, you can choose, between those kind of data tiering. I'm not sure if I'm using the right words that you want me to use, but data tiering or
tiering, stratification.
But no, I love that. And I think that the way that you guys have also coupled together the threat intelligence, that threat intelligence is there at your fingertips while you're also looking at the event and log data.
Right.
It's very important. That's one of the things that we've heard from customers all along is that, okay, now when an alarm goes off in the system, the SIEM, sometimes either us as their SOC or them, they use other third-party tools to help investigate the problem that is sitting right in front of them. And so how you guys have been stitching that information together is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's particularly as a lot of customers were like to your point will leverage threat. They may have multiple threat intelligence sources that they're trying to leverage, right?
Right.
And it's more work for them. They've got to now, I saw this alert in myself. Okay, I got to do all this research and which one has the information. How do I sort through it all, right? If and so what we're trying to say is our job, we should be trying to give them context right there in the here and now without having to go leave the SIEM and go and some customers are very sophisticated, have found ways to integrate threat intelligence into their SIEM, but the average customer doesn't have that time or knowledge on how to do that. I mean, and that's an area we'll keep diving into. But it's again, how do we make that experience better? Where I shouldn't have to go off outside here and get the context.
Yeah. So I want to come back to something because you said something and it triggered a question in my mind, and I want your raw thoughts on this, so please don't hold back. Will AI truly change the landscape in meaningful ways? Or is it just another buying buzzword right now for most of the vendors? You talk to VCs, you talk to people that are in the investor space. Everybody right now has got AI in their pitch decks. And I think it's sort of almost impossible for everybody to have what I would call legitimate, meaningful AI, in their product.
Great question. I'll take you back to 1984, which was the first AI wave I went through. So, and I'm dating myself here, but bear with me. So we were. I was a senior in college, and there was a class I was a computer science major, and there was a class in artificial intelligence. So this is 1984, and I had a big textbook on it, and my project was to write a program where I could play poker against the computer.
The computer, yeah.
And I did that, and it actually finally got it working. It was pretty cool, but that was the earlier days of AI, right? And and there were visions back then of things like machine learning, which I talked about, has been leveraged even in the security industry for starting 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there've been a lot of waves of AI that have not a lot, but a few over the last 40 years that have fallen by the wayside. So I think your question is a fair one,
Yeah.
right? Is this just another hype phase? And so I'd say it's a bit of both. I think the one we're going through is real. I mean, there's real value, there's real efficacy. We can all see it in the capabilities of things like Chat GPT. For fun, was having a margarita with a friend, and we thought about this. I won't get into the topic, but
Sure.
a title for a song, and we said, and so he types into Chat GPT, like, write me a country music song with this title,
Yeah.
and in a few seconds there was a whole song.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's I'm not the first one to say it. What's the breakthroughs are phenomenal, right? That have happened, and do we? I think the real question is, do we get to, and how long do we get to the ultimate? Is there modeling true human intelligence, right? I mean,
Right.
We all know some of the limitations today of AI, whether it's getting things wrong, which of course is very human. We all get things wrong.
We all get things wrong. Yeah.
But there are errors there. So and I'll come back to it from a security perspective, but there's been obviously a huge breakthrough and a stair step. And how do we? I think it's going to come down to there are ways that it can be leveraged, and our Graylog has implemented some, but we're actually trying to be really thoughtful and just go not put things in until we really know, hey, this is useful, this will help get outcomes, and not get ahead of ourselves. And I think it's the onus on most, because they're that's why I said it's a bit of both. There is a lot of hype going on around it, but there's actually a lot of real value, and it's up to vendors and customers to really distinguish what's useful and what's not. I'll give an example of you call the AI SOC, right? And as we talked about, there are opportunities to automate things and tasks and things like that, which is real valuable. Can I wholly rely on AI today for all of my threat detection? Can I just press a button and it's to know everything? Well, some of the limitations, this may change over time, but think about, large language models are usually 6 to 12 months, behind, right? Right. So if I'm relying, so there's new threats and things that have changed in the last 12 months,
Right.
And new threat campaigns and all kinds of things that that language model doesn't have incorporated in it. So
Yeah.
And so you're going to miss things. So it's those kind of things, and so I say it's a bit of both. Is my short answer.
Well, a lot of great ideas can come over having margaritas. So I feel like in some cases, some of the products right now in the cybersecurity space, they're on the bleeding edge of the AI integration, AI usage, because you're 100% right in that. And I think that should be highlighted and underscored, that the LLMs that are in use today really are not real time. They are not real time. And so if there is a new vulnerability, a new 0-day or activity that's been happening within the last month, 2 months, 3 months, the LLM is really not up on it. It's not real
Yeah.
time like you and me. And I also think that the reasoning. I was actually just having a conversation about this with another company yesterday. Is that the reasoning models aren't there yet. And if you and I make a mistake, we know within moments or seconds that we made a mistake. And it could either be, right, the difference between a life and death mistake or a small mistake, right? Like I changed the name of that file incorrectly and incorrectly saved it, and now I got to go redo that.
Yeah.
And where AI is not there yet in that reasoning modeling.
Right.
And so I still think that there is major road that needs to be laid in order for us to get to that aspect of implementation and usage of AI inside of some of these cybersecurity tools that we use to carry out protection to our customers. So
you have to be careful we don't go too far and then cause mistakes for customers. And I think about it since I can claim I've been in it since 1984. I won't say I've been in AI, but I've
right.
Experienced all those waves and been partially in it. And I think of them as step functions, right? And each wave reached a higher step and a higher step, and we've certainly done that with what's going on now. How far does that go, and where are the limitations?
Yeah.
And having been through it, I have a little dose of skepticism that it's not going to be everything people claim it next year, but we'll see. I also have to keep tabs of it, and it's moving really fast, right? And and so I think what we can do, what we can control, back to your point, is okay, let's make sure when we're leveraging, we're being thoughtful about it for our customers. We're not using it in a way that's going to get them in trouble, in the wrong way, where it's really useful. And if we can do that, by all means,
I've always appreciated your visionary. You have a great sense of being able to step back and understand the past and historical happenings. And, so, the audience that's listening to this or watching this, what are some of the cybersecurity companies that are trying to stay relevant for the next 3 to 5 years? What would you say to those companies? What would you say to those customers?
The advice, I would give is back to the word dynamic. This industry moves really fast and changes.
I would argue almost daily.
Yeah. It's so it's hard. It's true in any industry. You can't rest on your laurels, but the pace of change can be fast, a lot faster than other industries. So being ready for that and being flexible and adaptable, and you could have a point of view that this is a certain way of doing things, and you may need to evolve that point of view as things change. But at the same time, the pace, it can whipsaw you as well. And so being careful not to overreact, either, and whatever the latest flavor of the day is, changing your strategy and how you're doing things, because that's the hot thing. You really almost have to keep very skeptical. Maybe not skeptical is not exactly the right word, but really discern what's going on. Is it real? Is this change real? Is it valuable, or is this a false path
Yeah.
that I'm going to head down. It's part of what makes it fun to be in the industry as well, right? The
Yeah.
pace, but you got to be up for that. And to stay relevant, you're gonna see things go in a lot of directions. You have to have the right judgment to pick the right paths, so you don't go off on the off over the cliff.
Yeah.
Basically, it's so it's not easy. Yeah.
I've said this to some folks, and I either get people agree with the statement or they don't, but you can't always think about that you're wasting cash, in a specific one direction or another. And I think that sometimes we have to be okay and acceptable towards trials, meaning like we're going to test this. We're going to
Yep.
put some money in this direction and see if this has the outcome that we're looking for. We're going to put some money in this other direction and see if it comes with the outcomes that we're hoping for. And so you need some test trials. You need some A/B testing and sometimes A, B, and C testing.
Yeah.
And I think not only in the tech industry, but even more so in the cybersecurity in the tech industry, because we are seeing that whether you call it whipsaw, you call it dynamic, you call it the startups that are coming out that have special area focus in a particular area. And you're like, wow, I like what they're really doing there. The product works. And so I'm going to throw some money at it. I'm going to see if this helps us out. And, that's not always, people really do, they like to conserve cash. But I also feel like in some ways, they need to trial some things out and then not feel so bad when maybe something didn't come out the way that they had hoped it would.
Yeah. I think I think that and what you're identifying, applies really to any business or industry, either on the vendor or the customer side of things. You can be, think of a continuum of risk, right? And you can be so risk averse that you don't experiment. I like
Yeah.
trial, the word experiment, go back
Experiment.
to our science days, right?
Yeah.
You have a thesis around something and you experiment and create an experiment, try it out, see what the results are. And on the other end of the spectrum, you can be taking too many risks.
Right.
There's real implications. There's costs, not just financial, but others, right?
Right.
Distraction. So I like to think of the term taking calculated risks, and thinking through. If you're taking zero risk, then you're never going to make progress. And
Yeah.
You just
You won't.
whether it's a marketing strategy, where hey, I think this would work. I'm going to try it. I'm going to invest. But maybe limit your downside if it doesn't work. And I've certainly had ideas over my career that
Yep.
I thought this has got to work, and it didn't work,
Yep.
and I've had ones that have really worked, and you try, you're absolutely right. You gotta take some chances, try some things, learn from the ones that don't work, and just be calculated around it, be able to do enough of an experiment to know whether to really go fully into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely at least two takeaways that I'm taking away from our conversation today. One is I wrote this down, take challenges and turn them into opportunities. And then I love that the way that you said it, the calculated risk with experiments. And I hope that helps somebody out there in the space, technology, whether you're standing up servers or, creating clouds, out in AWS or Microsoft Azure, or if you're protecting them. I mean, we all have architectural plans in our mind, of what we want to set out to do, but we also know that, it's probably not gonna, you're probably not gonna hit it out of the ballpark, on your first try.
No.
But well, in some final remarks, Andy, just in wrapping this up, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to speak with me here today and to be on the Miller Mindset. Is there anything that you'd want to share, maybe some final thoughts around just staying grounded, in the value and in not chasing hype, or any final thoughts that you might want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think probably the one thing I would share is take the time to get away from the industry. Go take a long walk. When things get a little too crazy or too busy, just going out and taking a 2-3 mile walk can help clear your mind. Go on a bike ride or something like that. I just found when I'm working through a problem, or I get a lot of times get clarity from something as simple as that, right? And so that would be get to the point we said earlier. It's a very fast moving. Tech in general is that way. Security is even more so. And it's take the time to step away every now and then and get clarity and focus.
I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but you and I were on a hike in 2023, and something that you said to me stuck with me. You said, in the startup world, or even in cybersecurity tech, right? There's higher highs and there's lower lows.
Yeah.
And when I'm having those lower lows moment in the challenges, I often think about and reflect about our conversation that we had that day, and just working through it. And you're 100% right. We've got to step away and be humans, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, and not get overly stressed out about these things that I often think about. We get the opportunity to work on these challenges. Yeah. There's nobody forcing us. We could go make money doing a lot of other things to support our family and our households. But we get the opportunity to solve these challenges in the space.
That's right. We're lucky. We're lucky to have this opportunity, right? And think about where we are in the world, and to be working in a really interesting, non-boring industry, and so yeah, totally agree.
Well, hopefully I get a chance to go on a hike with you again sometime in the future. Maybe we can even have margaritas and create the next
country music song.
Country music song. But definitely, hopefully you're going to hit Red Rocks again sometime this year, and enjoy. And I'll look forward to speaking with you again. Love to have you back on the show, maybe again in a couple of months when your time and calendar frees up. But without keeping you on the show much longer, certainly appreciate you, Andy, and appreciate your partnership and relationship at Graylog, and hope the best for you guys here in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, likewise, Jason, and enjoyed the conversation as always.
Awesome. Thank you so much.